Hello, hello. Hi, everybody.
Hey everybody, welcome to What's the Plan? Let
Welcome.
us know where you're coming in from. There's always a first from somewhere in the country with an Indivisible group sometimes. And we got him, Dean Briggs
Hey.
from Indivisible Boros and Beyond in Clinton, Massachusetts. Welcome to the team. We got
All right, we got Portland, Oregon, Sacramento, California, Ann Arbor, North Plains, Oregon, Arizona represent, Vail, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. A lot of Arizona in the chat. Hi, everybody.
There's a very strong Indivisible movement in Arizona. We've been
Oh,
all
I
over.
know. I've been out there. I have met with some of y'all. They are an intense bunch. All right, let's see. We got Salem, Oregon, Liberty, Tennessee, Virginia, Florida, Rochester, New York, Tucson, Arizona again. Hi, everybody. Um, we got St. Lucia. We got Rhode Island, Massachusetts, oh my gosh, it's so fast. I love it. It is incredible, but also faster than I read. Oh my goodness, Charlotte, North Carolina, Honolulu, Indivisible, Vermont, Asheville, North Carolina, Dundee, Tupelo, Mississippi, Spicewood, California, possibly Spicewood, Colorado, Ann Arbor again. Oh my goodness. Hi, everybody. It is.
It's great to be here with everybody. Folks are going to keep on streaming in. That's great. We love it. Love to see it. I think there are going to be a few things to cover with everything going on. Leah, should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Hey, everybody. We didn't introduce ourselves. I'm Ezra.
I'm Leah.
And look, we're the co-founders, co-executive directors of Indivisible. Normally, we're really squinched together in the same room, but Leah is out, so I'm in my office. With actually, I don't know if folks have seen this backdrop. I'm pretty proud of this. I put together this myself. Interior design is not my passion or my specialty, but I like how this came together. I need a few more posters to add to it. Uh, Great to
Everything's
have the
great.
Telecaster back in there. But we are here for What's the Plan every Thursday to talk about what do we do together to push back against the authoritarian breakthrough moment. And when we started this about a year ago and it started kicking up, it was experimental. We didn't know if people were really going to want to tune in on a regular basis. We didn't know how the live Q&A was going to go. And it's become this incredible space where people from, as folks can see in the chat, people from all over the country get to come together and we get to actually organize together. We get to talk about the challenges in front of us. We get to talk about the political developments that are happening and what we can do. So that's why we were here together to talk about how we build and lead together a nationwide pro-democracy movement at a time of constitutional crisis. Leah, do you want to talk about the specifics of how this works?
Sure. So this is mostly a Q&A. We're going to take your questions live. If you've got a question, put it in the Q&A box on the bottom of your toolbar. If you want to vote for the questions that you want to see answered, you can use the little thumbs up function to vote for your top questions. If you're from an Indivisible group, let us know at the start of your question, and we will try to intersperse some of those in. We love to hear from practitioners. If you are watching the chat, and you will notice that we are posting resources, as we mentioned, specific news articles, Indivisible resources, access to different tools. Those will all be collected and sent out in the follow-up email. So if you miss them because the chat is going too fast, do not worry, they will be in your inbox. Similarly, this will be recorded. It will be sent out to everyone who registered, so you can watch it as many times as you want. Finally, just a note, we love our chat. Our chat is amazing. It has thousands of people who are having an incredible conversation about how we collectively fight for our democracy and our neighbors. Also, we are talking about hard stuff. We are talking about deeply personal, often deeply scary stuff. And it is natural for people to have really strong emotions about that because many of us are very personally impacted. Uh, we ask that is all natural. And also we ask that we keep the chat box constructive and collaborative. We are a diverse nationwide movement. We treat each other with respect, especially when we disagree on strategy or we are frustrated or scared. That is foundational to our ability to organize together.
Indeed, Leah. Want to welcome new people to the movement. I saw Laureen from Pittsburgh says she's a first timer. Welcome. We need first timers. Look, a pro-democracy movement depends on new people coming into the fold. We have to grow. Movements are like sharks. You're either moving and surviving, or you're not, and that's not good for you. We need to keep moving. We need to keep recruiting new people. Different thing that we think of is At some of those big mega churches in the South where I'm from, they save the parking spots at the front for people who have never been there before. Such a smart idea. So good. We need to be welcoming in this movement. We need to have more people come in. And so we like to kick off these What's the Plans with a welcoming for the new Indivisible groups who have formed in the last week, of which there are dozens every single week. And I'm not able to list all of them, but I get to go through just 10 that I more or less pick out of a hat from all over the country, red, blue, and purple states. So please give a warm Indivisible welcome to the new Indivisible groups who have formed just in the last 7 days. We've got Indivisible Fair Oaks. In Fair Oaks, California. We've got Indivisible Alameda in Alameda, California. We actually had 4 groups in California, and I just picked up 2. Sorry, y'all. There was a whole bunch of folks coming in from California this week. We've got Larkspur Indivisible in Larkspur, Colorado. We've got Montgomery County, Illinois, Indivisible in Hillsborough, Illinois, Indivisible Boone, Indiana in Zionsville, Indiana, Laurel Resist from Laurel, Maryland, TIES, I love a good acronym. We've got in Traverse City, Michigan, it's TIES, which stands for Traverse, Indivisible, Education, and Solidarity. Love that. TIES, welcome to the movement. We also have Hail Indivisible. Hail Indivisible, We the People. That's the full title registered in Hale, Michigan. Nebraska Voices in McCook, Nebraska. And Malden Indivisible in Portland, Oregon. Welcome, 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 new movement leaders. The water is warm. We have been organizing all year, and it's continuing to build steam. We reflected on this moment, Leah. You pointed this out a few times, and just to tell everybody here, we had a burst of energy within Indivisible when we first launched in 2016, 2017, and it was an incredible time for Indivisible when we were getting off started, and it was overwhelming how many folks joined. The vast, vast, vast majority of Indivisible groups in 2017 formed in the first 3 months of the year. That's what it looked like. And then it petered off and we were working with the Indivisible groups that were there. We are still more than a year after the election, averaging 2 or 3, some cases 4 new Indivisible groups in different parts of the country every single day, more than a year in. So the wave is building, y'all. The wave is building, and I think it's only going to continue to grow as we head into next year. It's incredible to see. Leah, why don't we talk a little bit about the news of the week? We wrote about this in the newsletter this week, but there is as successful as the movement has been and as weakened as this regime is, we saw a new memo from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, rattling her saber and Trump's saber at opposition. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an abrupt transition from welcoming all of the new folks in to talking about the ongoing campaign of political repression against dissent in this country. But it's actually like pretty related because we are in the process of organizing against authoritarianism, and they are in the process of trying to exert control as fast as they can before the bottom falls out. So let's talk about that. This week, when we talked about this in our email list, Pam Bondi issued a new memo basically designed to kind of operationalize NSPM 7, which is a directive, a presidential memorandum, a directive that came out following the Kirk assassination that basically was kind of like the full like the playbook for a large number of government agencies to operationalize increased repression of political opponents. There's a lot in this. You can read it. We can post it, the memo itself. But I think the things that are really important to pull out here is that, they're framing a lot of this as kind of cracking down on Antifa, which is not a thing. It is and not an organization, but they're framing it in ways that are intended to give them the space to go after a large number of people who are engaged in 100% legal, peaceful, and in fact, incredibly American activities of protest and dissent. This is focusing on ideologies rather than criminal acts. It is aimed at targeting support networks, so framing it to try to be able to go after funders and organizations in addition to individuals. It's ordering some new investigative and intelligence activities. It's like asking law enforcement to share information on this with the FBI. It's asking the FBI to produce ongoing lists of perpetrators, et cetera. We can go into detail on the actual substance, but I want to pull back a little bit and make clear our overall orientation here. We have known from the beginning that Donald Trump, part of the authoritarian playbook, is you claim powers you don't have to go after your opponents, whether that is business or other electeds or civil society. You claim powers you don't have and you push and you see if anybody stands their ground. And if people don't stand their ground, then you pocket those powers. Those powers are yours now, right? That is kind of the playbook. And what we've seen with other parts of society is a lot of people have been too scared to push back. We've seen this with corporations. We've seen this with certain university presidents or certain media companies. We, on the other hand, we are standing our ground. What we do at Indivisible, what we do across our network is organize peaceful opposition to extraordinarily vile and anti-American policies. Right? We organize to protect our democracy. We organize to protect our neighbors and our communities. We organize to demand a government that actually represents and includes and responds to our needs. That is as American as apple pie. We're proud to do it in the open. We're not going to pull back. We're not going to act like we're doing anything surreptitious. What we are doing is fundamentally rooted in the American tradition of protest and free speech. And the biggest danger in a moment like this is not the regime. The biggest danger is that we give them powers that they don't have and shrink back instead of actually recognizing that this is a sign of their own weakness. This is a sign of them trying to move their repression agenda as fast as they possibly can in order to crack down on the kinds of political protests that have been extremely effective over the last year in degrading their political capital, right? This is happening because they know that they need to go after civil society. They need to try to shut down the broad population of Americans who oppose what they are doing. So I don't think any of us wants to downplay the fact that this can be frightening, but I also want people to understand that it is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of weakness. And in fact, is a sign that what we are doing is working. So that is where we are. We're going to continue to organize. We're going to continue to do it in the open. We are proud of who we are and what we are doing. And we are proud to be a nationwide movement that is growing every week.
And if you are inspired by Leah, and as the emojis seem to demonstrate, Leah, you're going to be on a Substack. Is it tonight?
I
Substack
am. Oh
Wednesday
yes,
night?
this is actually a really great
Yeah.
good shout out. For folks who a lot of times we get questions as we go through something like what's the plan around how do I learn lessons from other pop or other groups who are organizing around the country? How do I learn lessons from other grassroots groups? There's this great Substack called the Grassroots Connector that's actually really dedicated to elevating the lessons learned, the experiences, the successes of different grassroots groups around the country. I personally get a lot of both inspiration and good ideas from it on a regular basis. So I will be live with Susan Wagner, who is one of the leaders of the Grassroots Connector tonight. But also feel free to check it out because I think it can be a really helpful resource for folks and just like learning from fellow practitioners.
Excellent. And there's a link to the chat. Thanks, Heidi, for posting that. Link to the chat tonight to check out Leah. I'm going to give a quick update on the We Ain't Buying It campaign, the economic pressure campaign that we joined in coalition with a whole bunch of powerful actors from across the ecosystem. We did a survey of the movement and we promised we'd come back because we're learning, we're experimenting, and we want to continue growing. For folks who aren't fully aware, the We Ain't Buying It campaign is not just an invisible thing. It's Black Voters Matter, it's 5051, it's Move On, it's Working Families Party. It's a whole bunch of groups from across the ecosystem who are hopping on board to try to flex our economic pressure that is necessary during a time of authoritarian breakthrough. We at Indivisible have traditionally mainly engaged in legislative advocacy or congressional advocacy, focusing on state officials or local officials or federal officials, and we haven't tapped into economic toolkits as much. It's just not been part of what we've done. The reason why we're doing it now is because this is not a normal right-wing administration. You will see, I will catch myself if I say administration. We call it a regime. We call it a regime because we believe this is an authoritarian breakthrough moment. And the hallmark of a regime, a right-wing regime, an authoritarian regime, is that they attack other sources of power. They attack businesses and media and universities and law firms. That's what they do. So if we're going to push back against that, yeah, by all means, Congress needs to exercise oversight. We shouldn't go along and pass bills that the regime wants. But we've also got to push back in instances like with Disney, when they fire a comedian for being critical of the regime. We've got to exercise our economic power to convince those actors to push back. For small targets like Avelo Airlines, it is easier actually because they're smaller. They can't withstand the kind of pressure. And we've seen Indivisible groups and many others apply pressure to this relatively small airline because they're going along with ICE and the deportation regime. And they've had some pretty damn successful impacts on this airline over the course of the last several months. It's very inspiring to see. The bigger targets that we were focused on with the We Ain't Buying campaign were Target. It's confusing. We say targets, but it's Target was one of the targets, Home Depot, and Amazon, one of the biggest boogeymans of democracy in the corporate world out there right now. And the truth of it is harder, but not impossible, as Disney showed us, to push these larger targets. The point of what's the we ain't buying it. The point of we ain't buying it was to start building this muscle for the movement overall. Because what we know is this regime is gearing up to have a terrible midterm election, and they're not going to just take it. They are probably going to pull some shenanigans to subvert the election, to try to steal the election. And as much as we are proud of the incredible no kings and hands off protests we've done, we know that's not going to be enough. Yes, we need massive amounts of people in the street, but we also need to be pushing on a multi-day effort and using our power as consumers to force businesses to say, nah, we're not going along with the theft of an election. So the point of engaging in these kind of tactics is both to extract some wins out of these companies, but also to start building this muscle over the course of the next year. So come next November, we're ready to go. So a couple of takeaways that we've had, and now that we've done this campaign with others and we've surveyed the groups, I just want to list a couple takeaways. We're estimating a substantial number of Indivisible movement members did participate, but not a majority. We're looking at somewhere around a quarter of the entire movement, which is to say hundreds of thousands of people, but not tens of millions of people participated in the We Ain't Buying It shopping pause over the Thanksgiving weekend. And among some of the more engaged portions of the movement, it was much higher participation, and there was a ton of energy. So we saw in some quarters this was really taking root. People were getting into it. They were participating in the campaign. That's good. And also, it wasn't 100% of the movement. I want to be clear. We should be clear-eyed about where we are and where we need to build from. One of the biggest barriers we faced to getting more participation in this was just a general skepticism that economic non-cooperation can actually work, especially against massive corporations like Amazon. And I'm going to tell you, I think that is a reasonable skepticism. These are hard campaigns to run. It is hard to move a trillion-dollar company off of supporting an authoritarian regime. It's hard to do. And also, our success depends on getting more people in so that they understand that the only way we get through this is with solidarity. That is necessary. We're going to have to keep building. So what we saw with the We Ain't Buying is we have reason to believe, which I can't share all the details. Leah told me I can't. And I have to listen to Leah, otherwise I get in trouble on this. But we have reason to believe that we sent a very clear message to Amazon, Target, and Home Depot. They know that this campaign was running. They felt the economic hit. And the message was clear to them that if you were supporting this regime, you are going to face some economic power from people who don't like that you are doing what you are doing. There was a lot of energy on the ground. There was a lot of coverage in media. We just got a ton of media hits. Us and the other coalition partners got a lot of coverage of what we were doing here. That got their attention. But the other big takeaway is that if we want to engage in these kind of big economic non-cooperation campaigns, we got to reach more people, y'all. We've got to grow this muscle. We've got to work it. We've got to get the general public beyond just movement leaders. The general public needs to be bought in. That's one of the things that made the Disney campaign so successful. Yes, it was Indivisibles. Yes, it was 5051. Yes, it was Move On and WFP and Black Voters Matter. But it was just in the water. It was in the air. It was in the ether. It was just part of the culture pushing back against Disney. And you need that to push these kind of economic actors. You do really need that. So, my summary of this was a successful test of an economic pressure campaign. What it demonstrated is that we can do a lot, but we're not quite there yet. We're not yet where we need to be, and we need to keep on building towards it. So what you should expect from Indivisible in the coming weeks and months is more economic pressure tactics. A lot of folks have been asking about the Spotify boycott campaign. We're currently running a Spotify Wrapped, a fun little tactic that you can engage in you're probably seeing these Spotify Wrapped everywhere, people posting what they were listening to most this year. we can take advantage of this moment to push back. The other thing coming up on Spotify are the Grammys. The Grammys are coming up, and a lot of Spotify content is going to be coming at us. We're looking at ways to take advantage of that as well. The message I hope folks get is this is a success. This can be a successful tactic. We are going to continue testing out methods, and if we are going to prevent any kind of shenanigans around the midterms next year, it's actually imperative that we continue to build on the success from the We Ain't Buying It. Uh, Leah, that's my takeaway. Anything else you want to add from the We Ain't Buying It campaign, or what comes next before we talk about one other item from you?
No, let's keep it moving
Okay,
because we
let's do
got to
it.
get to the questions. All right, so very quick housekeeping notice before we go to your questions. One of the ways that we build together for economic power, for mass mobilizations, et cetera, are these what's the plan calls. And in order to stay connected to what the plan calls, we are going to need you to re-register for 2026. Registration for these calls, if you signed up and you get like a weekly announcement, it only went through the end of this year. So we're going to ask you to click the link in the chat. We're going to send it out in the follow-up email as well to register for next year. You fill out the quick prompts on the Mobilize link. You check the boxes for the weeks you want to register. Once you do that, you are done and registered for all the calls. But if you like this and you want to continue to be invited to these calls and get the reminders and everything, please register. And it's also just helpful for us for tracking as well. So see you on the
That's
other side.
right. We are, just to let you all know, we're exploring other options, like technological options and ways to create ways for you to view and listen to this regularly going forward. This has been an experiment, as I said at the beginning. The what's the plan was like, maybe this is going to be a useful space. I think it's been extraordinarily useful this week or this whole year. We want to keep on innovating off of it. So I think next year you should expect to see more ways to view and download this, more guests appearing more regularly as we head into primary season and campaign season. I think there are going to be some cool candidates and some cool elections experts and some advocates who are going to be able to bring on board. We're going to keep on jamming on this, y'all, because we really like it and we're getting a lot of positive feedback on it. So thanks for making it such a success this year. Speaking of successes, I know we've been taking up a lot of space here, and we're going to get to Q&A. The last thing I'm going to say, most weeks we do a survey. Most weeks we do a survey. We haven't, I don't believe we did one last week. We have one final survey question for you in 2025. And I try to make a point of this. I think sometimes people see these survey questions go out in the broader ecosystem, the political ecosystem, and it can feel like, why are you asking me these questions? You're just asking me questions so that you can ask me money from me later. It's like a fake question. I want to assure you, we're not asking for money from these surveys. That's not the point of this. We're trying to take in information so that we can grow and build the movement. That's why we do this. And this survey question is I think really important. And on the face of it, you might think it's superficial, like, that's BS. I don't need to engage in that. But no, it's real because we're going to ask you about what you are proud of and what you are looking forward to next year. And look, I know the world is a disaster in many ways right now. I know we have an authoritarian in the White House, backed up by the Republicans who are just following him in lockstep. And there are a lot of reasons to be worried. The Pam Bondi memo just coming out last week is a reason to be worried. But the whole goal of an authoritarian regime is to grind you down, is to make you think that nothing is possible, that they are inevitable and you cannot resist them. And even if you fight back, you can't succeed. And in a moment like this, it is really, really important to celebrate your successes. It is important to acknowledge that we have indeed accomplished big things together. Admiring our successes, recognizing our successes, and looking optimistically forward to possible future successes are some of the most radical acts of resistance we can do when we are in the minority on the outside fighting back against an authoritarian regime. So when I ask you two questions in the follow-up survey, what are you most proud of accomplishing over the course of the last year? And two, looking forward to 2026, what are you most looking forward to accomplishing together with your fellow indivisibles? Those are real questions about how we build an opposition in this country. So that's my spiel. I'm not going to ask you for more, but if you would, please fill this out. We're going to look through, we're going to read through, we're hopefully going to be inspired by your responses, and then we will share back out at the last What's the Plan of the Year next week, the results of those surveys. So can't wait for that. Looking forward to reading over your questions. And with that, or your answers to the questions. With that, Leah, anything else before we jump into Q&A?
So we got to get to questions.
We got
We
to
got a
get to
lot.
questions.
Yeah.
Okay, going on to questions. I will read the first one. As a reminder, feel free to put them in the Q&A and vote up. The top voted question comes from Gene. Congratulations, Gene. Big winner. Will Indivisible call for collective action against Trump arresting peaceful protesters under his presidential order that targets individuals as domestic terrorists for views such as extremism on migration, race, and gender, and opposition to traditional American views on family, religion, and morality, among others? In inequity, I think it's inequality media, Robert Reich's thing, is demanding Congress take action to stop these abuses. Will Indivisible take action? And just to note, I saw people in the chat asking when Leah was talking, hey, can you post the memo? If you're signed up for our main email list, which if you're on this call, you probably are, you get our weekly newsletters. In the newsletter on Monday, we included a link to the memo. It was sent to us. The actual memo was sent to us over the weekend. And now I think it's been publicly reported by Ken Cliftonstein and some others. But we can check out the newsletter and you can find a link there, or we can also try to put it in the chat. But Leah, what
Yeah.
is our response to this? Like, what do we want Congress to do? What do we want? What's our advocacy in response to this threat against peaceful protest?
So this is one of those places where the gap between what a normal functional Congress that views its job as restraining the executive branch should do and what actual Congress is in any reason like in any way likely to do is so enormous that it influences our strategy and where we put our energy. Because you are absolutely correct that like a functioning Congress should be horrified by what is happening and acting to step in and restrain. And also everything that we know about the current Republican Congress suggests that nothing short of literally the Epstein files compels any kind of meaningful response that interferes with Donald Trump's agenda. And so while I think it's totally fine to do that as kind of like an ongoing make Republicans feel a little bit of heat, we think realistically the play here is around preparing to make overreach backfire. So these are all steps that have been moving forward, right, around this NSPM 7, the Bondi memo. This is all part of an ongoing plan to go after civil society. And whoever they choose as the targets, whether that's us, whether that's some other organization, no matter where they go, it's collectively important that everybody reacts with enormous outrage. And that's actually true whether or not you agree with those targets at all, because I think it's really important that we note that a lot of the ways that they've operationalized these strategies so far and a lot of the ways that they've sought to expand their power is by choosing to go after targets that they think the rest of us might not stand up and defend, right? They've chosen, this is an ongoing divide and conquer strategy where they go after marginalized communities that they think Democrats will be scared to stand up for. They go after immigrants. They go after trans kids. They go after Palestine protesters, right? Like they are coming after people where they think they can kind of make progress there, crack the door open, use those same powers on everybody else. And so whether it is Indivisible or whether it is another organization, we all collectively have to be ready for the moments when they try to kind of overreach, go after somebody who's very clearly just exercising their free speech rights, and all have their backs in a very clear and consistent way that demonstrates that the administration is overreaching and makes it politically backfire.
And we say this on most What's the Plans, but I'm going to keep on saying it. One thing that your Democratic electeds can do is make very clear that if there are officials within this regime in the DOJ or in the US Treasury Department or at the IRS or anywhere else who are considering engaging in unconstitutional or illegal behavior, they should worry about future investigations. They should
Yeah.
worry about receiving a subpoena. They should worry about criminal prosecution if they go along and follow orders that are illegal or unconstitutional from higher ups in this regime. We don't yet have the House. We don't yet have the Senate. We don't yet have the presidency. We will in the future. And it's very important that we make it a fait accompli. It is going to happen. It's an inevitability that the tools of oversight will be used to reinstate the rule of law, to reassert the Constitution, to confirm that we do indeed have the rights that we are guaranteed. And that is important for the future. But it's important to say now because there are going to be some marginal figures in this regime who are worried about that kind of future investigation and then will not engage in this behavior. Trump is a demented, declining, nearly out of office lame duck president. He can't do hardly anything on his own. He depends on thousands of other people to implement his ridiculous, unconstitutional, illegal policies. Those people should be worried about what comes next. And the way to get them worried is to get our leaders talking about this. Leah D asks, many are saying that our biggest issue now is not Trump, but rather the Supreme Court, which significantly restrained anything Biden did and allows anything Trump wants to do. Do we have any power to influence the Supreme Court? They have a lifetime appointment, so we cannot vote them out, but we can protest, demonstrate to influence their decision. But can we protest and demonstrate to influence their decisions? Could they be shamed, embarrassed enough to make better decisions?
This is a great question, and it comes up a lot because it is absolutely the case that the Supreme Court is a MAGA captured institution that is doing enormous damage, and that whether or not we win in 2028, we're going to have to deal with a Supreme Court that is, very much in the tank for the MAGA regime. What I would say is that the folks who are on that court are hardened ideologues. They are not people who are particularly shameable by us. They're perfectly aware that we don't like them. They not only like don't care, some of them are probably like kind of enjoy that, right? Because
Yeah.
they're very much opposed to everything that we stand for. Um, and so that's part of why we have historically not focused on targeting the Supreme Court as a body for protest. We just don't think that there's like a lot of leverage in showing that we're displeased, even in very large numbers, towards the Supreme Court. What I will say, and what does get their attention, is any possibility of court reform that would impact their power. And this is where we get to our leverage, right? Because fundamentally, John Roberts is not currently super worried about court reform. That is because most Democrats are not currently on the record for expanding the Supreme Court or for like the meaningful term limits, cycling people off, the kinds of things that would actually shift the balance of power in the Supreme Court out of this stranglehold that MAGA has on it. His current appraisal is that there's not actually a coherent opposition party that might win and then enact the kind of reforms that are necessary to threaten his power. If he starts to get worried that Democrats are getting in alignment and that they might win in the next election, and suddenly you've got 52 votes in the Senate for expanding the Supreme Court, they will act differently because they will get freaked out and they'll think we got to trim our sails, we got to step back, we got to preserve our power and try and, dial it back a little bit. But until there's actually a coherent Democratic opposition that is very clear about the role the Supreme Court is playing and very clear that it will expend political capital to address the situation, they're not going to be scared. So what I would say here is, for all of the energy and anger that we feel about these horrifying Supreme Court decisions, we need to take those and we need to ask our Democrats, like, what is your plan to fix this? How are you collectively going to organize to address this fundamental, incredible threat to the future of our democracy that is going to be with us no matter who wins in 2028?
And there is an opportunity coming up right now to push Democrats to do this. There are competitive primaries all over the country. An easy question to ask any candidate asking for your vote in a Democratic primary is, do you support expanding the court? It's an easy question. There are 130 plus Democrats in Democratic plus 10 districts across the country, the majority of the Democratic caucus in the House. Those are safe Democratic districts. They're going to be represented by some flavor of Democrat. They don't have to worry about the general election. There are not 130 Democrats in the House currently on the record for expanding the Supreme Court. There should be. It should be a unanimous position.
I'll just add, because I'm seeing in the chat some conversation about, oh, couldn't we just impeach some of the most problematic people? Which makes a lot of sense given the like rampant corruption of folks like Alito, and I almost said Scalia
Thomas.
because I'm an old person, but Alito and Clarence Thomas. It's a good question. So here's the deal. You actually are going to need a 2/3 majority to move an impeachment, whereas adding, a combination of reforms and expanding the court is a majority or requires a majority of the Senate. So when we talk about that as the path that we're asking for a commitment, that is why we see that as the actual credible theory that genuinely threatens their power on a reasonable timescale. I would love to imagine a world where we've got 2/3 of the Senate, but it's not coming up anytime soon.
That's right. Kim asks, is there anything reporters can do to take a stronger stance against Trump's degrading name calling when he doesn't like their questions? Allowing that kind of dehumanizing behavior to be normalized sets a very dangerous precedent, not to mention his refusal to stop using the R word. I'd say it's beyond a decorum issue. He is directly attacking the Fourth Estate. He's directly attacking the idea of a free and independent press and trying to undermine any sense that there is an objective reality outside of the propaganda that he spews. So I think this is a smart tactic by Trump to attack one of his opponents effectively. Leah, that said, what is an effective response from a journalist who's posing a a good question to Trump and then gets that kind of critique? What can they actually do, or what can they do collectively?
Well, look, I think this is the exact kind of situation in which you'd want to see collective solidarity and people organizing to back each other up, right? Because it's one thing if Donald Trump can single someone out and be, a horrible, offensive bully to them. And it's another thing if every single person follows that up with their question, hinging back on the same content, right? And so there's a bigger picture conversation here about why we have not seen the kind of spirited resistance across a bunch of different fronts in the journalism industry, or in the media industry, the way that we did in even 2017. Some of that is about corporate captors, some of that is about billionaires taking over papers like the Washington Post and the LA Times. Some of that is about media conglomerations that are, they might run a media entity, but they have a bigger corporate set of concerns that are subject to the regime, and they've decided to play ball in some pretty key ways and are not kind of supporting their employees. All of that is at play. And also, fundamentally, everybody here is making choices about how much they're going to go along and how much they're going to defy. It's the same set of choices that 1,000 other actors are making about how much they normalize this behavior by continuing on as if it doesn't concern them and how much they actually collectively band together and push back. So what I would say is I think that everyone in America, everyone, no matter who you are or what you're doing, you have an obligation to think about what's your sphere of influence and what can you do to defy this regime. And in that case, if you're a reporter, that means standing in solidarity with your colleagues when they're under threat.
I uh, I want to support free and independent media, Leah, and also I have very low expectations that mainstream media is going to do anything like that.
Yeah,
I think if you're looking for journalists who are actually going to stand up to Trump and not take that bullshit, what you're looking at are the new and emerging media institutions, folks like
100%.
the Contrarian or the Bulwark or some of these influencers and creators who have started standing up to actually provide real commentary and real analysis of what's going on. A lot of the mainstream media seems captured um, by this regime, or is so focused on currying favor and access that they're unwilling to call out blatantly unconstitutional behavior or efforts to undermine the press. So us as individuals trying to make it as practical as possible, what would I do in response to this? Like I feel for the journalists. There are a lot of the journalism is an honorable profession. You are part of sustaining our democracy, and I want to support the work that they're doing. The best thing I as an individual and us as a movement can do is try to support free and independent media that is doing the real work of being journalists and asking hard questions and not putting up with the BS coming out of the regime.
Agree with that.
David asks, I'm not sure others are dealing with this. I read the question, and I can assure you, David, many are dealing with this. But we have a good progressive House candidate, national, but the Democratic Party seems to have supported another candidate that entered the contest who immediately got a big money infusion. This is the same old playbook that we have seen from the Dem Party in the past. Do you have a suggestion as to how to prevent money being the dominant factor in determining the election results, as I fear it will be here? Curious where you are, David, but this is something we're going to see. We are already seeing, and we're going to continue seeing over the course of the next 6 months of the primary season. This is something that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee does. This is something that the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee does. This is something that Senate and House leadership both do. Indivisible does not do this. We have a primary program. The way the primary program works is there's got to be a agreement between the locals and Indivisible National that yes, we're behind this candidate. That's how we get in. We will never parachute into a state or district. I will say I've had some favorites in the past, and it was like, nope, the groups don't want it. And so we're like, well, we're not getting involved. That's how it works. That's how a real movement works. That's how listening to actual people on the ground works. That's not how the current party works. And a good example of this right now in Minnesota is the Senate race between Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan. Now, I want to be clear, we haven't endorsed anybody yet. We're currently talking to indivisible groups about where they want to be. This is a safe Senate seat. There's going to be a Democrat who represents this state come next November when the election occurs. But right now, Chuck Schumer is raising money for Angie Craig, the conservative Democrat in the race. Peggy Flanagan, the current lieutenant governor who's supported by Tim Walz, gave an interview recently where she said something like, Chuck Schumer's not a big fan of me, and I'm not a big fan of him. I'm paraphrasing, but that's more or less what she said. Uh, here's the answer. If we don't get involved, probably the Schumer's team will win. That's what will happen. The money will play. That will drive what happens in the primaries, and we'll lose. And the Democratic Party, as it currently exists, will continue to exist. And so the question for all of us, especially in blue states and in blue districts, is are we happy with the Democratic Party we have right now? And if the answer is no, then we've got to be the countervailing force. We've got to make it a political liability to be supported by Chuck Schumer. He can drive $1 million to Angie Craig. So what? Money doesn't vote, y'all. We can move people and we can move grassroots dollars. And if we do that, they don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance. But we have to do that if we want a party that fights back. And I want to be clear. If we lose there, if Angie Craig's the nominee, I'm 1,000% on Angie Craig's team. I'm under no illusion that there is a choice other than between the fascist and a Democrat come the general election. But we are talking about the primaries here. And it's incumbent on us on the outside who have been trying to get the Democratic Party in line for the last year to say, okay, you haven't done what we want, and now we're going to choose new leaders. That is democracy in action. And I would highly, highly, highly encourage folks to start paying attention to where they can do some good over the next 6 months in the primaries, because we're going to remake this Democratic Party into a fighting force. We're going to do that. But the way we do that is through massive grassroots action, not relying on a few big donors, not relying on Senate or House Democratic leadership to make it happen.
I do just want to, I agree with all that. That was great. I do just want to hone in on one specific part about this around the D-Trip and the relationship with money and kind of the influx of early money, because I think it's worth just pulling this out as like one of the more pernicious ways that money in politics shapes our political system, right? Because when the D-Trip is deciding, who is a good candidate, a lot of their criteria is around essentially like, can you produce a lot of money from your existing network? Either because you can self-fund or because
Yeah.
you know a lot of rich people. And that is, that determines an enormous amount of who we ultimately get as leaders in the Democratic Party right now, because, the ability to get into higher office, the ability to get into national office, first you've got to pass this, like, can you raise $200,000 by yourself test in your first week? And that means we get a lot of lawyers, you get a lot of business owners. You do not
Yeah.
get a lot of people who got a lot of generational wealth. You do not get a lot of teachers. You don't get a lot of union leaders. You don't get a lot of folks, nurses, folks from the working class. And then we have an incredible set of circular conversations about why are we losing the working class that rarely acknowledge that we're like sending out a lot of lawyers to talk to them, right? And so there are real like costs that come later around having a Congress that's mostly composed of people who don't personally feel stuff like the affordability crisis, trying to grapple with and be authentic ambassadors to a base of folks who are really hurting. And that's all downstream of this upstream question of like, can you raise $200,000 in the first week? So the answer here again is they may have the big checks, but you have a lot of
We're on
committed grassroots
fire.
volunteers. Ezra, am I breaking up? Uh-oh.
I
Hey,
think
Ezra,
I was
are you
breaking up and then
breaking
I
up or am
interrupted you, and
I?
you were on fire too. I was
Okay.
breaking up. You're
Okay,
good.
great. Wonderful. Always a question when we're in different places. Uh, they may have the big checks. You have volunteers, you have grassroots half, you have the ability to get probably a decent number of small donors up and running and in committed. Um, we're going to have a series of tests over the course of this year around what does it look like when big checks go up against people power. You can be one of them.
I just saw somebody in the chat ask if this was a black eye, and I will assure you, it's just weird lighting on my end. We are a non-violent movement. We do not throw physical punches that way. Um, great answers. Okay, moving on to the next question. Priscilla Sibley asks, regarding the Amazon Target Home Depot boycott, is there an end goal like there is for Disney, Hulu, Spotify boycotts? That is, restore Kimmel to the show, end ICE ads. What is the end goal for Amazon, Target, Home Depot? The question was raised by our steering committee. I'm a new member of the steering committee at Indivisible, Cumberland County, Maine. Great. Leah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think this is pointing to something real, which is there was a substantive difference between We Ain't Buying It and those other boycotts where there was a clear and precise what happens at the end. You want to talk
yeah.
about how we're thinking about this?
Well, let me pull them apart because part of the theory with We Ain't Buying It was to pull together several ongoing campaigns into a narrative intervention that's kind of like the movement of movements coming together to collectively back each other up and send a message to the Trump enablers, right? There has been an ongoing boycott of Target since February. March started with the Target fast, has been continuing. It is led by a set of leaders and organizers across the Black community, and it's focused specifically on the way that Target basically dropped all of its DEI commitments, and just all of its LGBT commitments as soon as Donald Trump was coming into office in a very blatant bid for of anticipatory obedience. And they've got a set of asks that are kind of like, you would reinstate the following things, you would do the following actions, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a clear strategy. This is an ongoing campaign. I know many of us are actively boycotting and continuing to not shop there. So this was like a narrative moment in an ongoing campaign. Similarly, with Home Depot, there have been organizers from a bunch of different organizations that have been trying to engage with Home Depot around its behavior in relation to raids in its parking lots and inside of its stores for an extended period of time. Some of those folks are actively in the process of boycotting. Some of them are trying to engage in an ongoing kind of constructive manner. That is there's a strategy there that's around turning up the heat on earned media so people understand that Home Depot has been unwilling to issue statements, condemn, take any actions in relation to these raids. And so each of the actions were themselves have a strategy. The theory of We Ain't Buying It was kind of like, let's get the different constituencies that are concerned about each of these all collectively together into one story of corporations that are enabling the administration, and then continue, they can continue the logic of their individual actions following.
Mhm. Alexandra asks, this is a new question. I haven't heard this come up, Leah. So I'm interested in getting into it. I find the destruction of state capacity carried out by the Trump admin or regime to be very frightening. And I'm interested in all the work we have to do to return the government to something like its pre-Trump functionality. What can local indivisible groups do to collate address breakdowns in government functions? And does Indivisible have a department dedicated to making informed policy suggestions regarding repairing the damage, like the Liberal Current's proposed Reconstruction Papers project?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that I feel as a former government employee myself, a former government employee of an office that was destroyed by the Trump administration, the Trafficking in Persons Office at the State Department. I feel you, and I feel for my friends and colleagues who have all been, dedicated public servants who have been taken out of those positions and left enormous gaps in what the state is able to do. So that is real. We are ourselves not like a think tank that's capable of maintaining that kind of analytical capacity, developing that kind of thinking, building out those recommendations. We try to be in dialogue with a lot of people who are, and who are collectively thinking about what does it take to recover and reconstruct and revive following this extraordinary attack on state capacity in America. I think that work is happening, although it's all still pretty nascent because this is just happening at a scale that is so much more than even a lot of the most pessimistic people predicted a year ago. And so I think it's happening. We're going to definitely be in touch with and engaged with think tanks on an ongoing basis that are really thinking about like what does it mean to rebuild state capacity, but also what does it mean to like rebuild in ways that actually, I don't help me out, say build back better, Ezra. Ways ways that build something better and different, right? Because none of us are like, what we need to do is go back in every single exact way to 2024. We all kind of collectively agree that there was a bunch of stuff that wasn't working about how people were experiencing a lot of American government. But what we do want to do is rebuild that capacity, rebuild for people the understanding that government can work for you, and rebuild the experience of having it deliver in a meaningful way.
Leah, I agree with that. And hmm, here's what I would say. We are currently in a live to fight another day stage of the authoritarian takeover moment. And unfortunately, because we don't have the House, the Senate, or the presidency, we can have the best plans in the world for 2027. Let's say we take the House, we take the Senate. fabulously successful next year, we protect the election results. What we can hope to do with that power is to stop the bad stuff that the regime is doing and to exact some price for the from those who have committed crimes or violated the Constitution. We can use the oversight powers that we have. That's what we're driving towards over the course of the next year. That's where we want to end up. And after the next election, as we are engaged in that kind of oversight, in that kind of preventative work, that's when the debate about, well, what happens when we have control of the government levers of power again in 2029? That's when that conversation starts up. And just to underline exactly what Leah said, what none of us here are interested in are proposals to go back to the way things were. We should be treating the 2028 election like the post Civil War or post World War II period. This is a rebuilding period where we should be doing moonshots. We should be saying this is what a reconstruction in the 21st century looks like. And we are looking for presidential candidates who have a vision that is that ambitious because we will have just survived the greatest attack on American democracy, certainly in modern American history, if not in American history. And we should not then just move forward and pretend like it didn't happen, because otherwise we will experience it again. And I'm excited for that moment as like a policy nerd and wonk who wants to do big, cool, good things. And also, I'm very clear that right now what we have to do is defeat the fascists. We got to take back the House, we got to take the Senate, and we have to exercise oversight. And then we get to have that incredible debate across the country about what the future of the Democratic Party and what future Democratic governance looks like. I want to get to that point, but the reason why you don't hear us talking about it a lot right now is because we're focused on what's available to us right now, which is defeating the fascist attack on the country. Gilda asks a question that if I answered, I would probably give too much information, Leah, so I will let you answer. When is the next No Kings national protest? Organizers need lead time. Let's set date now.
Yes. Okay. This is a great question. That is a very reasonable desire. I can guarantee to you that you will have more lead time than you have had for past protests. No Kings 1 and No Kings 2 were pulled together on 6 weeks and 5 weeks, respectively. There will be more lead time than that. We are currently working with a lot of different folks across the ecosystem to try to take in all the feedback people have, both from event organizers, people on the ground, attendees, and different coalition partners around No Kings 2, and to identify some key, like, not just the date, but some of the ways that we're going to make No Kings 3 huge, significant, more effective at absorbing folks locally, bigger than ever, all of the things that we collectively want for it in order to continue to build the pro-democracy movement in America. We are looking right now. I think what I can say safely is there's a couple of key premises. One is that we probably don't want to set it during a time when it's absolutely freezing for a lot of the country. So we're looking at, like, March or late March rather than February or January. The other is we want to be mindful of holidays, right? Like stuff like Easter, Passover, etc. But we do want to have it, relatively early in the first quarter. And so all of those processes of elimination get you towards late March. We do not have the formal date yet, but that is kind of the most likely date range that we are currently circling around.
We just had we do a monthly call similar to What's the Plan, just with Indivisible group leaders. And I'm seeing in the chat something similar that I saw in the chat with Indivisible group leaders, which is, to be frank, everybody, this isn't going to satisfy everybody in the movement. I think there are some folks in the movement who are like, let's do it every week. And there are some folks in the movement who say, we need months of lead time. Uh, Here, can I just like a peek behind the curtain and what the coalition discussions look like? We're looking at an arc of a campaign, and that arc of a campaign ends with a massive GOTV effort that delivers us the House and the Senate and protects the results with a huge grassroots showing throughout that period. That means the arc of movement growth is really important. In hands off, we had about 3 million people at 1,300 events. At No Kings 1, we had 2,100 events, 5 million people. At No Kings 2, we had 2,700 events, 7 million people. At No Kings 3, we should be trying to hit 9 million people. At No Kings 4, we should be trying to hit something like 11 million people. At No Kings 5, we should be trying to hit something like 13 million people. That seems like big numbers because they are. And that's also the scale you need if you're trying to hit 3.5% of the population. For folks who follow Maria Stephan and Erica Chenoweth, that percentage of the population that is actively engaged in opposition to the regime, that's how you build towards a movement. We then have to be very attentive to how do we make this as appealing to as many people as possible. And if you hold a mass protest when it is below zero temperatures in some part of the country, I know that people on this call are going to show up. Y'all are hard, y'all are
Yeah.
badasses. Y'all are hardcore. You're going to be there on the front lines. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about other folks who we want to get out, and we have to make it as appealing as possible for them to get out. So I'd say two things. One, there is going to be a lot of lead time, as Leah said. And two, if the only kind of protests and the only kind of organizing you're doing are no Kings protests next year, I will consider our organizing to have been a failure. These are the big tentpole events that we are doing next year, but in between them, we absolutely should be engaging in activities, including public protests, regional and local and national, that exist in between these big No Kings protests. That is hopefully how we will be able to grow over the course of the year and continue what we've seen this year.
I just want to give a shout out to the two people who said in exact succession in the chat, we need to do a No Kings every week, and we need a minimum of 6 months planning time. That is the range of different inputs that we are trying to reconcile here. So we appreciate that there is no answer that actually meets all of the different needs. And that's because No Kings is one of several different interventions that are going to have to collectively come together to project power and build our mobilization and disruption capacity over the course of this year.
Great. Okay, Porter asks, Jasmine Crockett is calling for states to avoid using Dominion Now Liberty voting machines because the company was purchased by MAGA election deniers. What can we do to support this effort? This comes from Delta County United in Escanaba, Michigan, and Operation Checks and Balances in Los Angeles. Leah, thoughts on voting machines?
Voting machine. So I don't have an immediate answer for you on this specific question, and I will look into it. I think that is something that we will be monitoring, and we're in touch with people whose full-time jobs are essentially understanding what threats are manifesting where and which ones they want to ask grassroots folks to prioritize. So we'll look into it. We'll see what we have. I know that we are quite concerned about the purchase of Dominion voting systems. It's one of several places where we're seeing efforts to, take control of machinery that is alarming. What I would say more generally is we are anticipating that next year sees a series of things. Like, one is just ongoing efforts to rig the rules of the game in advance. Stuff like the gerrymandering efforts that we have beat back successfully in large degree this year, thanks to incredible determined work by folks from red states to blue states. That's one piece. One piece is going to be kind of ongoing efforts to subvert and suppress the vote. That's going to happen at the national level. That's going to happen at the local level. It's going to be kind of a whack-a-mole situation where there will be all kinds of constant efforts to shape the election and the ground that it happens on by suppressing votes, and particularly by suppressing the votes of communities of color in advance. And we are going to have to be ready and capable and mobilizing on a regular basis to provide pressure. The other thing around this is we expect shenanigans around early vote, shenanigans around active attempts to repress, stuff about the day of and creating chaos, and particularly, basically, essentially creating the grounds for, baseless legal challenges that would allow the Trump administration to try to overturn results that it doesn't like, while accepting the results that it does in order to avert a Democratic House of Representatives, a Democratic Senate. And we are going to collectively need to, as a movement, be prepared to mass mobilize and, to project our power in a very serious way at that point. All of that is kind of the arc of the year. And so in terms of individual threats, what I can tell you is that we are going to be trying to monitor. We are going to be trying to elevate the ones where we think there's a credible intervention point. And we're also trying to build this into an overall strategy where the mobilizations that we're doing over the course of this year are actually partly about building the collective strength as necessary to enforce the results of the election at the end of the year. And with that, I believe we actually have to sign off. We actually have to let you all go on time today.
Oh, do we? I wanted to answer one more question.
Okay, but lightning round.
Okay, well, I missed Vidisha's question because I want to go to Steve's, but we'll cover Vidisha's real quick, which is,
I think that was what we were talking about in the last one. It's
oh
about
yeah, yeah, sorry. Okay, Steve's question was about first Tennessee 7, back of the map, pointing out that there were 334,000 registered slash unregistered voters who did not vote, and that's been killing us. Low turnout favors the other side. What more can we do? I, we have a belief in how to change this. And we believe this comes down to building a Democratic Party that people believe in. One of the problems facing the Democratic Party right now is that its brand is in the toilet. I do not like saying this because the other side is fascist, but we cannot get beyond this moment unless we look the problem square in the face. The Democratic Party's approval rating is lower than Trump's and lower than the Republican Party's. The single least popular political figure in this country is not Donald Trump. It is Chuck Schumer who leads the Democrats with a sub 20% approval rating. We've got to build a party that people can believe in. You can look at candidates who do manage to do this, who manage to get people to believe in politics again. Mamdani did this brilliantly, getting hordes of people out who were not out before. He shifted young voters. Young men came out for Mamdani by 30 or 40 points. It is possible to run candidates who convince the electorate that maybe this candidate is worth showing up for. What is very difficult to do is to run the exact same people and then convince them, well, you got to come out because Trump is so bad. If all our argument is Trump is so bad, you got to come out. I'm not saying we're screwed. I'm not saying we won't win. I'm saying it's harder. If we're able to run candidates who we select through a fair primary process, who excite the electorate, they are going to be able to make the argument in their own district that they're different. And we nationally will be able to make the argument that this isn't the old Democratic Party that's let you down before. This is a new party because you can look to California, you can look to Texas, you can look to Minnesota, you can look to New York, and look at all these exciting new candidates who have won primaries, who in some cases have taken on the establishment and won. There is evidence that the party is shifting, and you should come out and support that. That's the argument I would like to make to produce the biggest midterm margins in the history of the Republic next year. It is going to be difficult to make that argument unless we first engage in January, February, March, April, May, June, July in the primaries to come. That's why you see us talking about the primaries so much, because we cannot afford to wait until next October or next November to try to convince people to believe in the Democratic Party. I want to start convincing people to believe in the Democratic Party next month. And we're going to have the opportunity to do that. I hope a lot of folks get engaged to strengthen this party because it desperately needs strengthening and it's not going to do it on its own.
I do want to close out with one celebration before we go though, because we actually have an Indivisible movement victory that we do specially need to recognize when it comes to unexpected victories in red areas. Georgia 10, Indivisible Georgia 10 member Eric Geisler. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, but has run multiple times in a very, very deep red Georgia House District seat, House District 121, won on Tuesday in an incredible electoral victory that is surely scaring the crap out of every Republican in a red seat in Georgia. Amazing. It is a testament to like what happens when you really do commit to building political power everywhere. I know that it is deeply held by all of our folks in Georgia's 10th. Congratulations, y'all. We're doing the thing.
Congratulations. So proud of this movement. We've got our final What's the Plan next week. Look out for the follow-up email with the survey to share what you're proud of and what you're looking forward to so we can have a good discussion next week about that. If you're celebrating, happy Hanukkah for folks this weekend. We will see you next week in 7 days on December 18th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That was the plan, y'all. See you next week. Thanks for joining.
Bye.